Hello and welcome to What You Need Outlaws of Thunder Junction edition, where we take a whole set and boil it down to the few cards that budget players really need to be concerned about so you don't waste a bunch of wild cards on sets that might be heading out of standard sooner than later. But before we get into all that, take just a moment to like, comment, and subscribe because that kind of thing really keeps this boat moving. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Ether Drift has been an unusual set for many of us here in the budget community, but the fact is, once you've redeemed level 60 on the Ether Drift Mastery Pass, or perhaps opted not to do the Mastery Pass this season, you will have received every free-to-play available pack of Outlaws of Thunder Junction, which makes this the perfect time to look back at that set with 2020 vision and decide which cards budget players really need to have in their collection. Every season in the What You Need video, I really like to focus on those core deck concepts rather than focusing in on cards that are good in individual decks. I firmly believe that every budget player needs a red-based aggro deck, even if right now those tend to be a little bit more of the Boros persuasion. And for that category, the one card that I think is an absolute must-have is Demonic Ruckus. 2 mana enchantment aura. It boosts your creature up, it gives it evasion in the form of menace as well as trample. And when they take that creature off the board that now has a target on its back, you get to draw a card. This also has a flexible casting cost of a single red through the plot mechanic. Otherwise, its casting cost is 2 mana. So this allows you to plot the Ruckus on turn 1, play your turn 2 creature, and then immediately cast the Ruckus onto it. And of course, if that's a hasty creature, you're going to get in for some very hard-hitting damage. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you that you absolutely have to have Slick Shot Show Off for this style of red-based aggro deck. And they're right about one thing. It's a very good card. And if you have them, there is no reason not to run them in those decks at this point. However, there is a lot of questions yet to be answered of what a mono-red aggro / potentially prowess-based deck is going to look like post-rotation. And until those questions get answered, I would hold off on crafting these. Again, if you already have them, no reason not to run them, but I don't know that I'd be burning wildcards on them at this particular moment in time. The second thing that I like to look at for each set is any uncommon commander potential that is out there. And, well, Miriam is one of those cards that you're going to want at least one of for your mounts-based deck. It's one of your starters. It continues to get better season after season, and you need one of these. Probably not an ideal commander for a Brawl or Standard Brawl deck of her own, however. On the other hand, Honest Rutstein goes in all of your Golgari-based decks as at least a one-of, and makes a suitable commander in his own right. When it comes to versatile bombs in this set, there's one card that we really need to talk about, and that, of course, is the Lost Jite. Not only is this the fixed cousin of the original Jite, which was busted as hell, it's a 1 mana legendary artifact equipment, so having one in your deck is pretty easy and you never have to worry about drawing a second one. Its /abilities of untapping a land, target creature cannot block this turn, so you can take away your opponent's best blocker, or put a +1/+1 counter on an equipped creature. Very, very solid. And that +1/+1 counter stays with the creature, so if you end up moving the Jite, you can actually add counters all over the board, and if they destroy the Jite, as they are going to be very incentivized to do, you still get to keep the counters. And with a mana cost of 1 colorless and an equip cost of 1, it's really, really a strong card. You can throw this basically into any standard deck right now that runs creatures and get profit out of this card. And of course, you'll be able to throw this into Brawl decks for literally years. It is a mythic, and you also need to be aware that it is not from the main Outlaws of Thunder Junction set. Instead, it is from the subset, the Big Score. While I tend to avoid cards that really only fit into a very specific archetype or singular deck, there are two cards here that have formed an archetype that is certainly worth being on a budget player's radar. Of course, we're talking about Nurturing Pixie and This Town Ain't Big Enough, which basically unlocks the Pixie pickup deck, or, well, it goes by various names and builds. But the idea is that you use these cards to replay and get additional value out of permanent-based effect cards. It's a little hard to explain if you haven't seen it before, but if you've been on Arena, I'm almost certain you have seen it. So why don't we just say these two cards are very good, and let's take a look at a budget-friendly build that I put together for it. So as usual, I've taken the liberty of trying to organize this a little bit. The first column here are those bounce back cards. Of course, we named Nurturing Pixie just a moment ago, as well as This Town Ain't Big Enough. That gets a cost reduction if you bounce one of your own permanents, which is what we want to do anyway. We're also running for Fear of Isolation from the Dustborn set. As an additional cost to cast this spell, return a permanent you control to its owner's hand. So again, it's a bounce effect, 2 mana, 2/3 flyer that's doing something that we wanted to begin with. The second column here is part of that Enchantress package that we see a whole lot. Optimistic Scavenger in there as 4 of, as well as 3 copies of Sheltered by Ghost for removal and, well, kind of an aggressive edge that Sheltered by Ghost tends to have as well. Setting that up on something like your Pixie or your Fear of Isolation just really locks in the game as far as I'm concerned. The next column are enchantments that are things that we want to play and then bounce. So Storm Chaser's Talent is a 4 of rare that's well worth it. For 1 blue mana, it gives you a 1/1 prowess creature, which again, like, you're going to be casting your non-creature spells pretty often in this deck. So that prowess trigger is going to happen more than you want, or more than you expect, I guess I should say. Level 2 for an additional 4 mana. Return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. What you're going for here is getting back This Town Ain't Big Enough to do it all over again. Hopeless Nightmare is a great turn 1 play to enable a fantastic turn 2 Pixie. This loses life. Your opponent discards a card. If you're not able to bounce it back, if it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, scry 2, and it has an onboard ability to sacrifice it. Another similar card is Nowhere to Run, but this time, of course, we are targeting creatures with -3/-3 removal. Creatures your opponents control can be the target of spells or abilities as though they didn't have hexproof. Ward abilities of those creatures don't trigger, so that solves a lot of problems. There's actually a similar card in the most recent set that also fills this gap, that targets a creature, and if they don't have a creature to sacrifice, you instead make them discard a card. So you might end up going like 3/3/3. It really all depends. Dire Ghoul is really just in here as an alternative turn 1 play to enable a Pixie. To get that as a 2/2 flyer on the board. Go for the Throat has obvious applications here. And a card that's really nice, in my opinion, is Kaido Bane of Nightmares, mostly because of the ninjutsu abilities. Just does a lot. But if you don't have it, I don't think I would craft it for this budget deck. I would save your wildcards instead for things like your Storm Chaser's Talent, which tends to be very much an enabling backbone on this type of deck. The mana base here is going to look pretty basic here to any of our Stronghold regulars. We're running
the 6 dual lands that we get in our starters, as well as 3 essentially dual lands, as well as a pretty substantial basic mana base.
So there it is, guys. That's what I think you need to have in your collection from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, whether you've been playing since the set was introduced or you just started and you're looking to backfill some of those standard legal sets, as well as a very budget-friendly and surprisingly powerful deck that may simply be hiding in your collection. Pixie pickup is well worth looking into and worth potentially crafting those blue 1 mana rare enchantments that let you do so much within that deck. And of course, I want to take this opportunity to thank my supporting patrons, because being a small content creator comes with big bills. And I just couldn't do everything that I do without their monthly support. Thanks, guys. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful in your arena experience, we have a few suggestions for what you could watch next.